I must have waltzed right into a time machine all the way back to the late 90s and or early 2000s with the movie I've just watched in a theater. I haven't seen camp like this since Eight-Legged Freaks. Cold Storage is a horror comedy directed by Jonny Campbell. It stars Keery, Georgina Campbell, and Liam Neeson. The plot follows a mutating, highly contagious fungus that escapes a sealed facility, and two young employees, joined by a grizzled bioterror operative, must survive the wildest night shift ever to save humanity from extinction. I was interested in this movie mainly for the cast that was involved in it. Despite the show Stranger Things having the biggest fall off imaginable, Keery is certainly one of the highlights throughout. The trailer also promised a pretty fun tone, which made me excited to see what Liam Neeson will be getting up to here, as he did a good job showing his comedy chops in the newest Naked Gun movie. So with all that being said, let's take a look at what this has to offer. First, I'm going to talk about the performances, leading with Keery. Keery is known for having roles in movies like Spree and Free Guy, and is known for roles in TV shows like Stranger Things, as I've already mentioned. I thought Keery did a good job in his role. He's doing the usual slacker shtick that he's been giving to him due to the latter seasons of Stranger Things. I found it funny that most of the time he delivered his dialogue, his vocal inflections reminded me of how Andrew Garfield would speak in a lot of his roles. Occasionally it made me wonder if he was intentionally intended for the role with the material he was given. He gave me a couple of chuckles, mainly due to his line deliveries especially. He had this laid back attitude in certain moments, then knew when to really ham it up with his performance. He does a good job at having this awkward energy with his co-stars, which made him pretty endearing too. Georgina Campbell plays the role of the other employee along with Keery. She's known for having roles in movies like Barbarian and King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. I thought she did good in her role. A lot of her own brand of humor is fun to see, especially in the early half of the movie, while also portraying her character to be headstrong during a lot of the action-orientated scenes, similarly to how she achieved this in the movie Barbarian. Liam Neeson is in this movie too. He's known for having roles in movies like Taken and the Lego Movie. Despite this role being a general, he still has a lot of moments where he's able to be pretty comedic. However, I feel like with some of the material that's written here, his comedy doesn't shine nearly as strong as it did in the new Naked Gun movie. There was a line or two, however, which did make me either grin or chuckle due to the way his line readings are done. When he isn't being funny, he turns to doing the usual stoic routine that he would have been doing in his more dramatic action roles. The balance he's able to achieve here I thought was pulled off pretty well. Susie Bacon is in this movie too. She's known for having roles in movies like Smile and Mayor of Easttown. While she has limited screen time, I thought she did good when she was able to have her headstrong points. And her performance was especially impressive when she had to be put in perilous moments, as she pulls it off pretty realistically. Moving on to the actual plot of the movie, I personally want to say I love how this movie starts. The first 10 to 15 minutes of this thing is done well, as like I said in the intro, felt very reminiscent of horror comedies that would go straight to DVD in the late 90s, which for once isn't really meant to be a complaint. Right off the bat, this thing doesn't take itself seriously, and it wants you to know that, and I can respect it for that. Part of me wanted the concept of this segment to be extended even longer, maybe not the entire movie, but at least the first half could have been like it. It has a good desert setting, being set in Western Australia, and it's set up constantly as it has you guessing what's going to happen next. The rest of the movie isn't bad or anything. I think it just had a lot of fun with this part. Surprisingly, it takes a lot of time to get into what the opening sets up, as this movie is an infection movie, not specifically a zombie movie by any means, but just people and other creatures get infected constantly. It makes decent use of its one location, as an abundance of different rooms are used well here. I found it funny that later on in the movie, this thing does the usual horror trope of introducing a bunch of new characters just for them to be cannon fodder to get killed off. And when they are killed, the kills can be fun, but they never feel incredibly warranted, as they're only introduced a couple of minutes before getting killed. At times, this movie can feel a little sluggish, especially since a lot of the more horror-orientated scenes come into it later after the opening sequence. I don't feel the need to talk about the ending of this thing, as I don't want to go too deep into spoilers, but it has a very standard Hollywood happy ending, which can be a little jarring to horror fans sometimes. Next, I'm going to talk about the cinematography, which is done by Tony Slater-Ling, who's done cinematography for films like Funny Cow and the 2023 Full Monty. For a majority of the movie, I thought this was shot pretty well. There's a good use of neon lighting, which makes the colors pop for a majority of the runtime. As for the actual camera techniques, there's a lot of good uses of Dutch angles, which most of the time is used to heighten the intensity of what's happening in the scenes. Other than this coming up a few times, however, there isn't anything incredibly creative or unique. Obviously, since this is a horror movie, one of the things I have to talk about is the actual horror elements that are present here. Since this is an infection movie, an aspect of that fact is an element of body horror, as there's lots of moments where you have characters morphing and changing into some pretty horrific things. Apart from that though, there is a decent amount of jump scares present in this thing, which are always done in a really predictable way from how they're always set up, but this is just a me thing. I think jump scares are never a good form of horror. A majority of the gore effects are done well too, as there is occasions where they seem practical. However, there is also occasions where the gore effects are CGI, and I want to discuss that more in depth in this next section. Most of the CGI in this movie consists of the use of animals or explosions, and like I said, some gore effects. Whenever animals are shown on screen, they're pretty much always CGI. Like, there's a lot of deers in this movie and they're never real. Kind of reminded me of the CGI that's in The Walking Dead, how that also looks like shit. The designs of them are horrendous looking in this movie. They genuinely feel like they're a decade old and sometimes look out of place here. When the gore effects are done using CGI, there's an abundance of CGI blood, which was annoying to see in a movie like this because there is occasions where a lot of creature effects look to be done practically, as all of the infected people are all wet and goopy, harking to an era of films like The Thing or The Fly. So seeing them use a lot of CGI here is a little disheartening to see, since a majority of this movie is trying to be an homage to movies that are similar to how a lot of moments here are being played out. Despite some of the negatives that I've been saying in this review, I did like this movie to an extent. This isn't a terrible movie by any means, and yeah, as the film goes on, it definitely leads into being so bad it's good territory. From the get-go, this movie presents itself to be a turn your brain off popcorn flick, and it gets to be that wholeheartedly, always committing to the bit, which I can fully respect it for doing. I think despite how campy it gets, I sometimes wish it went further in places, but I feel like I had overhyped this movie in my head more than what it ended up being. The movie isn't even incredibly long, but I do feel like it staggers in places, as I was only able to be mildly enjoyed, although I feel like other fans of camp movies will get more a kick out of this than I was able to. I'm giving Cold Storage 3 stars. This movie is home to some pretty fun performances from a lot of the leading characters involved. There's a lot of disgusting, gross out gore effects at times that can be pretty fun to see on screen when it proves to be practical, at least. I just wish it leaned into the practical effects fully. It still gets entertaining for a majority of the runtime at least, and I feel like movies like this don't really get made as often as they should anymore, especially ones that have bigger budgets with charismatic actors. It feels like plots like this only get reserved for direct-to-DVD low budget movies, but seeing it under a Hollywood lens was fun to see how they could achieve it here. Like I said, I think some people will like this more than I did, so if you're interested in checking this out, it's currently running in cinemas and I believe this could be worth seeing on the big screen.